Hello, welcome back everyone. So today we're going to talk about additive techniques for monotype. And I thought I would demonstrate this as well, since a number of you have your plexiglass that already has Sharpie dedicated to it. One really good way to get rid of this, to erase the Sharpie, is to use denatured alcohol, or if you use fingernail polish remover, which you might have. And we should just keep some of that in the studio as well. So just take a clean rag, a little bit of this denatured alcohol, and you can do this under the vent, so you don't have to do it out in the studio, because this stuff is pretty loud. It'll knock you out. And I see some errant ink on this that I'm just gonna go ahead and hit as well. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start from scratch. This is really gonna be a catch-all, just sort of sampler. I'm not gonna promise that I'm making art today. Really, I'm just gonna show you a range of techniques to think about that you can approach additive with, but they don't, you probably wouldn't want to use all of these on the same composition, right? This is just going to be a free-for-all. So I'm going to show you some different ways of going about it, and you might pick one or two of them and not all of them. So first of all, I'm going to line up my paper to create a template. So I have a Sharpie, here's my paper, and I can mark off on the edge of this paper. This is a lighter Sharpie. So it won't be as obtrusive as the black, but this way we know where our paper is going to be. Use this as a template. Remember, it's a good idea to draw a backwards F, so that way you know which side is the front. This print I'm going to do as a bleed print, but if you wanted a smaller image within here, say you could mark off like, 2 inches on the top, 2 inches on the sides. And then a little bit more space at the bottom. Remember, because that idea that it'll appear to float. So this is a way to mark off your border. I know some of you are having questions about how to do that. That's a little crooked. Do that again. Like so. And then there we have our image area, if you can see that on the camera, our image area within the paper, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and soak my paper now, so that while I'm messing around with this, the paper is soaking and getting prepared. So remember, when you do the paper, completely submerge it in the tank over here. I'm gonna sit down to do this. I've got my Portland black etching ink. Remember, ink is really similar to oil paint, but a few things have been done to it to make it more printable. It's going to actually get into the surface of the paper as opposed to just sitting on top of it. If you were to try to do this with oil paint, as opposed to oil-based printmaking ink, it would sit on the surface of the paper, and eventually over time the oil that's inside of the paint would leak out into the paper. So what this does instead is it actually sets into the paper itself. That's why we use nicer printmaking ink, and that's why we use nicer printmaking paper. Both of those things are going to be better long term. This is archival, and archival as a word means something that's going to last as a method in art. So it's in terms of like conserving art or taking care of art. Like, Sharpie newsprint isn't going to last as long as oil-based paint would on canvas, right? Those are using archival materials. So what we have to do to the ink, though, to make it more like paint, is we have to use some modifiers. So this is one of them. This is called burnt plate oil. If you're familiar with oil paint, and if you're used to doing painting techniques where you thin it down. This is similar to linseed oil. Actually, it's linseed oil that's been highly refined and more pure than linseed oil that you would use in paint applications. I'm gonna put a little bit of this on my palette here. Clean up the lid too when you do this so that you can put the cap back on. And I'm also gonna give myself, this is mineral spirits here. Again, this is kind of noxious stuff. It'll knock you out. So don't use a ton of it. And you might need to take breaks. You don't want to be sitting around this a really long time because it is a solvent. And luckily we have pretty good ventilation here. I'm just going to put a little bit of that on my palette so that I can make the ink spread easier to make it paintable as opposed to rolling it out. Although I'm going to roll out too. I've got a roller, a brayer. I've got a range of brushes. Remember, these can be old, like really junky, cheap, cruddy brushes because you're probably gonna, even though you can clean them out with mineral spirits, they're gonna get roughed up pretty quick. So you might need to replace them faster than if you were doing acrylic or oil-based paint. So you can bring in some older ones. I've got some like textural stuff too. I'm just gonna demonstrate with bubble wrap, but this could be fabric. This could be a doily. This could be a leaf. For additive techniques, you can print a lot of different types of materials and just have at it. Speaking of ink, check this out. I look pretty good. I got some ink this summer. Different kind of ink though. All right, here's what we're gonna do. I got this little criminal image here. It's pretty dope. Put that under here. I've got this gorilla I'm feeling pretty good about. Actually, let's do this cat. That cat's pretty fresh. Let's do the cat. I'm just gonna put these under here and I'm gonna use these as a kind of a template. Now you could draw everything out on a piece of paper if you wanted to do that. Last time, some of you all were doing that. Allie drew an image out. So did Julie, drew it out first before you did your trace. That's a good idea. You can plan ahead. Remember, you're thinking about the idea of chaos or chaotic for this series, so what makes sense for that? And now what we're gonna do is we're gonna take our brush and just additive, pretty straightforward. Whatever I add here, ink-wise, is going to print. So I'm gonna take this, and this is the burnt plate oil. I'm gonna take a little bit of the ink, and if you can see this, basically what I'm doing is dabbing my brush into the straight ink and then dragging it across the burnt plate oil to make it more paintable, I guess if that's a word. And then I'm going to just brush it on here. This will sit on the surface of the plexiglass. And if you looked at it from a profile view, it's gonna be kind of like a puddle. It'll puddle up. Versus, I'm gonna show you, these are modifiers. So the burnt plate oil is a ink modifier, as is the mineral spirits. And I'll show you what some of those things do. The solvent, more solvent-based things, they're gonna dry out quicker. So you don't have as much time. You might be able to kind of play around for like an hour with your brush strokes and everything if it's burnt plate oil, but you might only have about 15 minutes if it is the mineral spirits or the solvent. And you can actually even mix the two, not just one. The paper will re-wet it a little bit, but it could dry out completely before you even get a chance to print. So you don't have all the time in the world. So what I'm doing is I'm starting with the burnt plate oil that takes longer to dry, and I'm gonna show you the solvent technique last, right before I print, so that way it doesn't dry out. Sound good? I like sometimes just to pretend someone's in here with me, so that way I don't feel like I'm just talking to myself, right? It's kind of like filming yourself with no audience. This generation probably gets it though on TikTok. You know, you film yourself all the time and then put it on TikTok and somebody watches it and you get millions of followers, get like a viral audience. But it's different if you're doing a little video for the sake of art. Let's get viral. I think if you made printmaking viral, if you made something you did in this class viral on TikTok and got like, let's say a minimum of 1 million likes, let's say automatic A for the semester. That sound good? I think that would be pretty cool. So I'm gonna do a little bit for this cat as well. Love this little meow meow cat here, pretty fresh. You can get kind of a gradation too by letting your strokes kind of die out a little bit so it doesn't have the straight 100% saturation. So here it's fully black, and then as the lines start to hold less ink, you can get some grays or with like a softer impression. So in other words, you get a little bit of versatility in the brush stroke by how you control it. And this, you can create some really nice delicate lines. So think about how you might do this in combination with like your trace monotype or subtractive. You could do a little bit of both. More of a dog person, but I'm kind of liking this little sleeping cat here. What about y'all? You dog people, cat people? So I'm painting this out here. Textural things, pretty cool. I've got this Michael Bublé wrap here, a little bubble wrap. And I'm gonna take some ink and I wanna show you how this can be additive or subtractive, really, honestly. So I'm gonna take a little bit of ink like this, not modifying it in any way, I'm just doing a bead. Remember, when you roll out the ink, just do a bead of it like this, about as wide as your brayer. Take your brayer, ink it up, go back and forth. Don't just kind of keep going in the same space, but lift it up, redistribute that ink. Remember, if you're storing don't store it this way like this, store it like that, upside down. This one got a little bit of a dip in it. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this bubble wrap and I'm gonna ink it up. It's very satisfying. I was packaging up a record today to send to a friend and I was like, shit, I should use this bubble wrap for my demonstration. So I'm just gonna take this bubble wrap now and let's do it right here, like so. Additive, I'm adding ink right now to the surface of my matrix, which should print, like so. That'll look pretty dope. I've got these letters over here, which is kind of neat because they're transfer letters, so they're already backwards, which is pretty cool. I'm gonna take these, I'm gonna ink them up. These should look pretty cool. They got like a fuzzy texture to them. Tatum cleaned the sink room up and these were in there, so we'll use these. The other thing that I can do is I can work a little bit subtractively too, which I'll show you on here. Say I put some ink right here like this, right? That's additive, totally additive. But I can also now take a brush to that, draw back into it, and that's subtractive. And here we are combining techniques already. That's the point, is to use these creatively, inventively, for your own artistic aim, especially thinking about this theme of chaotic. This print's already looking pretty chaotic. There's not necessarily a rhyme or reason to it. Remember, these got to be backwards. So I'm going to just lay these on top of and this is probably going to be pretty subtle. And then the other thing that I wanted to show you that I started to talk about was mineral spirits. So using a solvent-based ink modifier as opposed to the burnt plate oil. So here I have that now. So I've got some solvent on the brush. I'm going to go through the ink here, and you'll see that it starts to spread in a different way. I'm going to give myself a border here around this cat. It just spreads in a different way. It kind of like feels like it leaches out or leaks out, as opposed to the burnt plate oil, like I mentioned, like sits on the top of the surface of the plexiglass. Let's see what we can do with this. Let's print this, shall we? So I'm gonna go ahead and stop this video. And the next video is gonna be how to print your additive techniques. Peace, signing off.